All right, sir. I'm going to mute.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Dean Dorton Cloud Days. We'll get started in about 2 minutes here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 8:31 on the Eastern time zone here, so we'll go ahead and jump in. So today's session is called Business Performance Visualized. What we'll be talking about is if you have data in your business, a lot of times there's difficulty in creating insights from this data, deciding what to do next, how to utilize this data to make decisions. We're going to walk through basically an intro to that, what things come into play, what's a good way to proceed when you're at this point and know that you have data that you're looking for answers for, but maybe haven't been able to glean any insights on your own. And then we'll walk through a demonstration of a tool that we use that's actually free and publicly accessible. We'll walk through a scenario where we're looking at data that we have for a business, and we'll pull that in and show how we can go through and quickly display that data, get it up in a visualization format, and walk through that together. We do have one poll in this presentation. If you'd like to participate in the polls, you can do it through text, dialing 22333, entering the message there, texting the correct response, and it should show up and populate on our slide that we'll get to it a little bit later. If you can't get into that with this many people, we can also use the chat function that's available through Teams. So that said, my name is Ed McGillis. I head up the data science analytics group at Dean Dorton. There's a few ways you can find me. My email will be at the end of this presentation as well. But what we're going to do today, so we're going to talk about what is business analytics. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot. It means different things to different people. A lot of different definitions here. We'll walk through kind of a simplified approach to what this is. As part of that, the business analytics journey itself is rather complex, often creates a lot of confusion in organizations, along with different people along different parts of that journey that may hear buzzwords around technology or what they can do with the data. And we'll go and walk through that and talk about where the different phases are, what comes up during those phases. So that'll be, if anybody else has any tidbits when we get there, that would be great to share also through chat. All right. Jenny, just so or Brett, I keep getting the lobby pop up over the slides here. I don't know if there's a way to disable that for me. So I can't click forward. All right. So what is business analytics? What better way to start this question than with a word cloud? So business analytics can be multiples of these things, right? So everything from, you need special tools to do business analytics. You have to have databases. I need to create data models. I need to run AI, machine learning across my data to see what's going on. I want to see my performance. I need to apply statistical methods to this data. I need to segment my data out. It can really be a lot of things, and a lot of the confusion and where people kind of get stuck at the beginning is this breadth of options, data, information. And I like to boil it down to this. So business analytics is using data to answer questions. So if you look for definitions of business analytics, you'll see this filled out different ways. So you might see business analytics is creating models using statistical analysis in using data to create warehouses or to create insights, to make predictions. But in the end, it really boils down to what you're seeing here. It boils down to business analytics is using data to answer questions. You could always expand on this, but in the simplest form, it comes back to this as the base case. So you don't have to use a lot of times specialized tools. I mean, some people do business analytics in Excel. You don't have to create your own, machine learning models. More and more that's getting baked into products you can use as well, and that might not even be right for what your business case is. So if it starts getting confusing, I always go back to this definition. You're just using your data to answer questions. Those questions may be, I need insights on my business. Those questions may be, how do I predict how different factors are going to impact sales next quarter? That questions part can get complex or it can stay easy, but at its root, we need to remember that the definition of what we're going after for business analytics is nice and small and fits on a slide. We could always expand from there when we want to get more complex. All right, so the analytics journey itself is really the part I like people to understand this, because it's a very long journey. The spaces you see in between the phases here are not to scale. So this is going to be different than what you actually experience in an organization. We'll start off at descriptive. So almost every organization has a descriptive level right now. So descriptive is mostly looking at the past, whether that's last week, last month, last quarter, last year, and asking what happened. When you look at your organization and how you're currently getting this information now, most of this would come on reports. So whether they're quarterly reports that somebody's pushing out in Excel, maybe there's a dashboard created where you're looking at quarterly results or annual results. But the key differentiator in descriptive is you're looking in the past, you're just looking at what actually happened. What are my results for this time period across any number of metrics that I'm following or KPIs that I'm following. Most organizations have this. Most organizations do exist on reports today. They pass these around sometimes in email, sometimes they're on a shared drive. They go through various revisions before they make their way up the chain and usually get involved in some kind of quarterly report. But this is the base level of business analytics, and it's one that most people are familiar with. Our next level is diagnostic. So on diagnostic, we switch from what happened to why did it happen. So we keep all the base information from descriptive, but now we know the results, but we're trying to figure out what happened that the results turned out this way. So what was the catalyst? What was the cause? Can we figure out why sales dropped 20% from Q2 to Q3? What can we do to start looking at that? This is where you can start getting in a little bit to the machine learning realm and some algorithms that are built into some of the tools. During our demo, we will actually go through an example of this where we're moving from descriptive to diagnostic, just because it's the first big jump on this analytics journey. And sometimes it can be difficult, but with one of the tools that we're going to show, it can be a smoother transition into that diagnostic world. Predictive analytics, this is where we're actually, we want to predict what's going to happen based on what we know, based on what we know causes what we know. So we have descriptive and diagnostic handled. How can we be predictive? So how do I predict what my sales are going to be for the next year? Maybe quotas. How do I anticipate what my quota fulfillment is going to be? And a few things we can do here for that. The one thing to be careful about in this realm is that through various honed processes, humans are actually fairly good at some of this information. So for example, predicting quotas, predicting revenue coming in based on what they already know for a quarter ahead of time. It's difficult to plug in a generic machine learning model and come up with something closer than what humans could do. What would be harder for humans would be projecting out longer. That's where you might use the power of analytics and machine learning to figure out, how we can go beyond what the humans are good at and start predicting other things, or start predicting more complex scenarios with maybe 100 inputs that a human would have a very difficult time predicting on their own. So this is pretty far up the evolution chain on the analytics journey. The organizations doing this usually have their own customized what we'll call machine learning models that are sitting out on one of the cloud spaces somewhere, whether it's Google, AWS, or Azure. They're updating these. This is fairly prevalent in financial industry, especially in the hedge fund area, where they have models for different stocks and they're trying to pick what's going to happen the next day, the week, the month. So it gets significantly more complex, but if you can get it to work, also a lot more powerful for an organization. And then the last level here is a level even above that, prescriptive analytics. This is where you're really using all the models you've created, all the data you have, and you're using this to really influence and make decisions about the company. So the systems are telling you what decisions need to be made, how prescriptive the word itself, what do we need to do to make something happen? This is showing you what levers would need to be pulled. Kind of the holy grail. Very few organizations ever get to this level, but it is kind of that final step. And by final step, it's still something that has to be tweaked, has to be nurtured. You would have to go back and update this to make sure you don't get what we call data drift. As data starts to change, all the models need to be touched and changed again. But again, this is a pretty complex endpoint here, and one that we don't see that often in practice. But it's good to see the whole realm of, what's possible here. For most organizations, if we can start to get a good foothold at that diagnostics level, you're going to have a leg up because most organizations don't have a functioning diagnostics model with their business analytics. All right. So our first slide here, just talking about what we did, what we just showed with analytics. This slide is just asking for the participants to answer what level your organization is currently utilizing on business analytics. Is it more descriptive? What happened? Report-based, diagnostic, where we can get into the why did something happen, or even predictive and prescriptive if you have any models in place and you're doing any kind of regression to do predictions or anything like that. Feel free to answer here. We'll give this a couple minutes here. You can go to the website up there, pullev.com/Dean D222, or text Dean D222 to 22333. A lot of D's there to read out. Or you can just put it in the chat as well, like Ginny did. Looks like we got a few people coming in and out of the chat here. Well, the poll might not be working for everybody, or the chat might not be working. I see a lot of people coming out of the chat and back in. But internally, we got some descriptives there. As long as you're thinking about this yourself and where you want your organization to go, I think that's probably beneficial. So we'll assume that the last time we did this, we had about 50 respondents. Most were in descriptive and diagnostic, and then we actually had a couple in predictive as well. So that's kind of the bell curve we see when we talk to organizations. All right, so we're going to walk through just an example of, let's start with something most people are probably familiar with. We're going to have an Excel sheet that has data. This data is going to be for a worldwide bicycle manufacturing company. And we'll be able to see how that data is presented. And then we're going to use a tool called Microsoft Power BI to actually go in and start modeling that data and show you, if we spend 15 or so minutes on something, what we could come up with in an example like this. The good thing about the tool we're going to use is that it is free. You don't need a license for it. You could actually, after this presentation, go download it on your own, connect it up to one of your Excel documents, and start your path in data analytics, which is why we like to show it. So I'm going to switch and show my desktop here. Due to the tool and how we're using it here, I use a pretty wide desktop. So some of the items may be a little difficult to see. But this is our base. This is our base Excel sheet here. Again, it's sales data, and these are my tables that I'm worried about here. So I have different products that I'm selling. I have my customer list of customers, and I have my demographic information here. So I got yearly income, total children, education, occupation, addresses. I'd like to show some of that as I'm going through and building my visualizations out. So that's some of the information I want to key on as a business owner. I have my sales data. I have the different territories I work in here: United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, France. A lot of stuff here, a lot in the US. Every data analytics project needs a calendar table, and that's what this is. Basically just one row for every date that exists. And then I also create a budget. So what I expect to sell over a time period, I have a table for that as well. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to go to the Power BI tool I have open here. And that same Excel document we were looking at, I'm going to open that and show you after I close it, because it doesn't want it open somewhere else. I'm going to show you what this looks like with the tool from Power BI from the start here. So I just opened up this tool called Power BI Desktop. And the first thing that pops up, it's going to want you to get data. So this is what happens when I say I want to get an Excel sheet for data. I have to point it to the Excel sheet. It's going to do some processing and connect to that sheet, and it's going to throw me back. Okay, I've looked at this sheet. I see these 6 tables. Is this right? You can click a table, look through these. We're going to say, yep, these were the 6 tables in the Excel sheet. And I trust that you're going to be able to pull these in and load them for me. So when I say load, it's now making connections to that Excel sheet. It's reading the number of rows. It's seeing if there's any interdependencies between these, which you'll see that there is in a moment. And you say loading data to model, that's what it's doing. And then it'll give you a size count here, or a row count. There we go. So you saw we had a couple there, 1,000 rows, a couple 200. With this tool, the way to get back and forth is actually way over here on the left. But if I go over here, you can see that I now have 6 tables loaded. Yes, the font on these is really small, but calendar, customers, product. It's taken my Excel sheet and basically loaded it in here. But one of the things a tool like this does is it determines dependencies between the data I'm bringing in, even though those dependencies were not explicitly laid out in Excel. So it knows, for example, that I have a product key in product and a product key in sales, and that's a relationship that I can drive on. It knows that I have the same relationship here with budget. So I have a product key in budget that goes to my product table. Territories, I have a sales territory key, and in my sales, I also have that column. So the system's smart enough when it's loading data that it knows it wants to create that model and show these relationships in our tool. Now, to enable some of the more advanced fun that we're going to show in the second part of this demonstration, there's a few things you need to do here with aliasing, which is, saying if I really want product key, what's another name for that? Item, maybe, things like that. There's a little bit of tweaking you can do to make this a little better that we're not going to go through at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to a finished version that already has that done, but I did want to show the ease in pulling in data raw from an Excel sheet like that. But on this finished version, the difference is you can see right off the bat that calendar is now linked in to budget, sales, customer, and we have another relationship there as well. So there's a little bit more work done to get it up and running, but we still have our same 6 data tables here that we talked about earlier. So that doesn't change. All right, from now on, we are going to build out and go through an example of going from descriptive to diagnostic on this. So we're going to make a page called Quick Insights here. The first thing we're going to do is we want to create just our overall look at how our sales have been doing according to budget. When we're using this tool, I know this might be new to some of you and these far columns might be hard to see. You got about 25, 26 different what we call visualizations to use here. We're going to keep pretty simple for this one. But again, if it's a tool you download and use on your own, since it's free, I'll show you how to switch between these and you can try all of these out. Some of them are pretty cool. Some of them are a little gimmicky and not so useful. For this first one, where we're going to look at sales and budget, we're going to use what's called a line and clustered column chart, which is right here. We click that, it's going to start painting the canvas where it thinks it should go. Since I know what I want it to look like, I'm going to kind of size it up like this. Nothing's there yet, of course. And then what we do is we look at our fields or the tables we talked about earlier to figure out what needs to go into these selections. Now, again, learning what all of these mean from the beginning is a bit of an uphill climb, but we'll walk through some of that as we're going. So what I know is I want my axis to be a month. And to do that, I have that in my calendar table, which is set up a few different ways, but I can go under my month year here, and I can pull month out for my shared axis. I'm not gonna be able to show anything without data, of course. So we're going to pull up for the column values. We're going to look at both the budget that we have and the sales, because we're going to want to compare how that was year over year. So we're not going to do a series with this. We're just going to do what's called column values. Budget, you can see that my budget starts to show up already. And since this is clustered, I can go over here and I know my sales table has my sales amounts. And that's the order I want them in. So I can look for an entire year here. There are filters we can add. You can see those over here. We have a page filter already that's saying year is 2016 because I know that's where the data is and that works. But with a few clicks, I can see, my entire performance from January to December here. And then not just my performance, but how that matched up to my plan or my budget. So, I beat the budget in June. I did not beat the budget in August, but I can see the flow of my business here as well, which is pretty helpful. So let's go ahead and just have some fun and add in, since we're here, we'll add in a few more visualizations, looking at different elements of the business and maybe focusing a little more on my customer demographics in case I want to get in maybe some targeted marketing around some of these items. So we're going to create a chart down here. I'm going to pick this one, which is a stacked column chart. And for this one, we're going to look at, we're going to do the same month-to-month view, but we're going to look at how my sales compare for my customers based on the number of children they have at home. So I want to see if that's a driving factor. If they have 0 children, what % of my sales do they make up? Either they're empty nesters or they're young. And then I want to view that with people that actually have children at home that might be buying children's bikes. So I can get a quick idea of that. That might be a problem that historically somebody would have to ask somebody to make a report on, tell them where to find the data, and decide how to carve that up. Just dragging a few things here, we can come up with that answer, in about 30 seconds. So that's what we'll do now. We're going to go back to pulling the same month for our axis that we did earlier. We want to see how this changes. Let's say we want to look at it over the summer period, for example. My legend, I want to be customer, and then should be number of children at home. Yep. And my value, of course, that drives all this, as you saw before, is going to be sales. That's where we're going to go for that. That's going to give me a pretty quick look at all my data, January through December. I'm a little more interested in summer months for this example, so I can go up here. I shall add a new month just to keep that clean. I can add a month, and I can say with a couple clicks here, I want to look at June, July, and August. So I just want to focus on my summer months here. And they actually stay pretty consistent. So no children at home definitely make up the bulk of my sales. 5 children at home make up pretty good swath here. I think that demographic is probably pretty low. And I can see kind of went down here with 2 kids. So it doesn't vary a whole lot during the summer, but the big takeaway here is younger customers or empty nesters that have 0 kids at home make up over 50% of my sales. So that's probably a good tidbit for me to be able to follow up on and track if I want to increase any of these segments here, or if I want to continue to build my market share in the areas where I already appear to be pretty dominant. All right, let's go to another one. One thing that often impacts sales of bikes, especially outside of the United States, is the number of cars owned. So since I'm international, that might be something I want to look at here. So for this, we're going to go to a stacked bar chart. We'll look at it a slightly different way. On the axis of this, let's actually use country. So you probably might not be able to see all these tables on the left, but again, these are all came from my Excel sheet, so I should be familiar with this data. I'm going to use customer country as my axis, which will give me what I need there. And I should, for my legend, I'm going to look at number of cars owned, right above number of kids owned. And I put it in the wrong place. We want that on the legend because we want our sales, as I mentioned before, to be our driving force on values. We're measuring everything by sales. And what I can see here, well, right off the bat, you get a couple of bits of information baked in. So we can see my sales are highest in the United States, followed by Australia and the UK, and then Germany, Canada. This stacked may not be giving me exactly what I need because it's hard to compare one segment of my number of cars owned to a different country. So this is where, and the tool we use facilitates this. Even though I've already created this, I can change the format of this visualization really nicely. So I can change this to a stacked chart which will break all these out individually pretty easily here. So I go from the first visualization to the third, and it's a little small here, but now I can see a little better my total number of cars owned to what we know in the United States, that is the primary number of cars owned per family. So I get a lot of sales there, but if I look in United Kingdom, my biggest sales in Germany, France, my biggest sales come from people that have 0 cars. So people that are more than likely using bicycles for commuting, living in the city where there's no parking, things like that. So those trends that we kind of know about the difference of getting to work in Europe versus the United States are pretty apparent here. So again, with the cool thing though is, we've spent about 10 minutes on this so far, and from a spreadsheet, we've already pulled out some cool information here that we can go ahead and use. We'll use one more visualization here. Let's say I want to segment my customers a little bit. I want to look at education level. And again, I want to look at that, how it changes over time. I want to look at my spring to summer period, which would be my peak sales period there. So we're going to start with the stacked column chart. We'll put it down here. It's going to warn us that we're getting close to the margins, which is just fine for us. We're going to look at this by month again. Get our month axis up there. All right. Our legend is going to be customer education level, which they've freely given us. Even though I can't find it, I'm sure it's in here. Education, there we go. So we got the education level in here. Of course, we're going to look at sales for our values. That's what drives the data points. And we get all of our months here, but again, I want to just look at the springtime leading up to the summer months. So we'll call April spring in this case. All right, and again, it's pretty close here. We get a compression on graduate degree. They're 23% of our sales, drops down to 12. Another interesting visualization we might want to look at this with would be the ribbon chart, which sometimes we use to see how different things flow from what place they're in, for in this case our sales, and how they move over time. So with a click, I can select this guy and I can pick my ribbon, which is over here, just because I've used it a lot. I can see that bachelor stays pretty steady as my top sales group, but I can see graduate here really drops down in May and then comes back to its norm June, July, and August. That may be finals, dissertations, whatever's going on here, that they're not out shopping towards the end of a semester. But I can see my partial college hikes up, taking the summer off, getting ready to buy bikes. So again, an interesting way to look at data. Could you get more out of that by going deeper? It's a good question, and that's what we're going to do with our last example on this page here. We're going to do a deep dive using the machine learning and AI tools that are built into Power BI. So they continuously create these models in Power BI that are very fast and allow you to do machine learning on your device through Power BI. Typically, for anybody that's used machine learning models, used AI models, they're fairly complex to set up. You need a lot of bandwidth. Usually you're going to run them on cloud providers. So Google Cloud, AWS, Azure. Usually they're going to sit there and churn, depending on, if you have tens of millions of rows, they could churn for hours to give you your outputs. What Microsoft has done is bake some really useful algorithms into this product where they can go get you insights automatically just based on the data, and then you can decide whether those insights are worth anything or not. So it's a little bit of user assistance as well. But for example, let's look at why our sales dropped from June to July. Our budget also dropped, so obviously whoever made this budget had an idea they were going to drop. But let's say I'm not sure why they did that. I want to look at what's going on here and see if I can figure this out. So instead of going to the data, flipping through spreadsheets, what I can now do in Power BI is I can right click on this and I can go through here and use this new analyze feature where I can ask it to explain this decrease. So when I click this, what it's doing is it's throwing models at the decrease and looking for correlations in the data of things that changed that would make that decrease happen. From there, it's up to us to look through these because correlation does not equal causation. We have to look through these and figure out what's really making sense. And some of this, again, may be kind of small on your screens, but this first example it wants us to look at is talking about decreases by occupation. I have my largest decrease from this time period in skilled manual labor. So again, outside of the US, this might be people that commute more on bicycles. So that's a hint. Sales by month number and children at home, biggest drop was with 0. Might be another hint there. You're getting into the summer, people might be going on vacation. And then I kind of look at this one here and I see that Europe, my sales in Europe are, as we saw earlier, are not as big as my North America sales. So for the drop to be almost as big in Europe as North America, that's a red flag for me that I probably need to look a little bit more into Europe and see what's going on there. And so as I get to my next slide that it wants me to look at here, I can see that, okay, this is my Europe drop. My France sales are actually not that big compared to US. So for it to be ranking second, this is something that I probably want to look at. And so I have the option down here to look at this a few different ways. We just did the ribbon, so I like to go back to that. And I can see indeed when we talked about France here, France was my 4th in sales and it's dropped to my last in sales in July. So that took a big chunk of my sales out. I had 108,000 and it dropped in half almost from the month before. So if this is something I want to look at further to analyze further, the tool allows me to click this plus right here, and it's actually going to add this right on my page so that I can then work with it. So it created the visualization for me. I can go through here and change it if I need to. I don't necessarily need to, but what I want to do is look at France again, and I'm going to go through the same thing I just did. So I'm going to ask it to explain the decrease again. I'm going to make it do it twice, but we're at a different level this time. And now I can see, okay, you dropped 46.66%. In the first slide I get back, it's breaking these down by regions for me. And it's kind of starts to click if you're going through here. If you understand European business, especially in city centers, during the summer months, most of those shut down. So most of the people in France are going to the countryside, going to the Riviera, going wherever. There's not actually a lot of workers in that July time period. And if we looked up what these areas are here, 75, the one with the biggest drop, is actually Paris proper. And we dropped 80 or 62% there. These are the areas immediately surrounding Paris. So this is more the people who live in Paris, 20%, 70% there. So pretty big impact that we can trace back to the summer habits of the European market. And since we showed earlier that skilled labor dropped, it's a pretty good guess that we could follow up on that this drop is for people that were using bikes to commute to these European destinations over the summer months. So something, coming up with a conclusion like that, just looking at your Excel data and making tables and creating references, something like that may take a long time to come up with. If you have somebody that's very familiar with the trends, again, they may be able to zone in on that pretty quickly. But as me, somebody who does not know bicycle trends in Europe, I could still take this data and just dive into a few places, and come up with that solution pretty easily through this tool, which is pretty powerful, especially when you realize that this tool itself is free. So anybody could download Power BI Desktop and walk through the example that I just did. And if you'd like to, please send me an email after the session and I can give you the test Excel file that we use for this, and you can download this and do the same things that we did. So if anybody needs homework. All right. The other thing you're seeing there is a benefit of Power BI. If you click on anything on Power BI where it's related like this, it's going to cross filter the other results. So if I look at, number of children for August is 0. What I'm going to get everywhere else is just the data for sales that had 0 children in August. That's why only August is lit up here, and that's why August is lit up here. So that's just a tool in Power BI that lets you do cross filtering. This cheap and easy way. If I just want to look at France everywhere in June, I could do that here. I could also select France here and just look at all my sales for France. You can see that ribbon's lit up again. So a lot of power in here that we really don't have time to go over. We do intro to Power BI workshops if anybody's interested in learning all the ins and outs of PowerPoint as well. But for now, we'll leave you with that. What we want to show next is when we continue to talk about the machine learning and AI built into Power BI, one area they've really spent a lot of time in is what we call NLP, which stands for natural language processing. And what that's resulted in is the ability to set up this module called Q&A. What Q&A does is it allows you to type in plain text a question that you want to ask about the data. So there is some setup that happens on the tables that I showed you. I think I mentioned we can set up synonyms for things. It's asking up here, hey, you can help us by adding synonyms. When somebody says sales, what column are they really talking about? When somebody says product, show me which column they're talking about. So it does have a little bit of setup to it, but once it's there, it really allows a lot of ad hoc analysis from users that may not want to create their own dashboards or may not have the skill sets or have the time to learn how to do so. So I always like to show this. I think this is a really great addition they have here. So I'm going to type a few things here. So I'm going to say what were the sales amounts for July? And I know the data is mostly 2016, so I'm going to point it there. So I can see my total sales were 1.37 million. I'm going to add onto that and I want to see that by product name. What were my sales across my products? So I get a pretty quick, long tail chart here. Can see pretty quickly what my highest product sale was. One benefit to doing it like this is with a couple clicks here, and that's the wrong click. With a couple clicks here, I can actually click and export my results into a CSV. So I'd have a CSV of all these products and their sales if I wanted to do any further analysis in Excel, for example, or send it to somebody. Getting that from a visualization isn't always easy, but this product actually makes that pretty seamless. So let's go to a different angle here. Let's say we're building a customer list. We want to target a segment of our customers, and we want to see how many of them there are. So I want to say, maybe I want to do on income. So how many, you have to be able to type and spell customers, of course, to do this. Have a yearly income, we'll say 50,000. Here, then 50K. So I have 10,000 customers that have a yearly income greater than 50K. And less than. All right, so that's a nice segment for us, 7,000 customers. Probably get a mix there of professionals, young professionals, older skilled labor maybe, and maybe that's what we want to target for one of our campaigns. So to get that information out from here though, it's crazy simple. Instead of how many customers, all I have to change this to is which customers. And I get a full drop of spreadsheet of all my customer demographics that fit into that range. And again, this becomes powerful because I can just click over here, I can export this data, and then I have this sheet. So again, ways to drive our business and get insights. We can use this to ask questions that weren't set up, like this, like we were able to do with this nice page in visualizations. If we need more than the visualizations and want more info, I have a really easy portal into that I can now use, just export this, feed this into my marketing program or my mail list server, things like that, and go from there. So the tool is powerful, and I thought it was worthwhile to show you how to do a few things on there in between the PowerPoint slides. So hopefully that was useful. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint slides. Yeah, it should resume for us. There we go. All right, so you saw the demo. You saw how we can take data, chop it up, display it. How do you get started with this at your own organization? We like to call this the 5 W's. So the first question is why? Why do you want the analytics? What problem are you trying to solve? I know I'm cheating with the why and what, both being a W here, but this really determines how you set up the data and what data you end up going after. We see some organizations try to build all up data warehouses because they want to be able to report on it. If it's at the enterprise level and it helps things, that could be an option. But most of the time we're building what we call a reporting solution to answer a single problem. Whether that problem is I want to increase sales, whether that problem is I need to monitor my logistics, I need to monitor my job costing and manufacturing. It's important to know what problem you're going after and be able to articulate what the success criteria would be coming out of your analytics project. The next question is who's going to be involved. With these projects, they really rely on business acumen and business experts. It's usually not ideal for IT to drive these projects, even though IT certainly will be involved for the data assets. But it's important to figure out who's going to be your key decision makers. And they have to be people that understand the business strategy and why you're asking the question you're asking. So it's important to get your correct stakeholders on board when you're going after an analytics solution. The next question is, what are we going to get? And I like this map because this map proves true in a lot of organizations. You think you might know where you're going to get the data you need, then you find out it's on the other side of the island in a different system that maybe has different gatekeepers. Sometimes those gatekeepers may also run a circus, as you see there on the bottom. Sometimes they might be friendly natives in the upper right, or sometimes you might go too far and hit the pirate ship. So lots of ways that this part of the project can go sideways, and important to realize that up front, and that you'll need to enlist stakeholders across the areas that you're pulling data from in order to make this successful. As part of that, this is a great slide. When are we going to do it? How fast you can move depends on how fast the organization moves, or in another word, how fast you can herd cats. So is there going to have to be a culture change in order to have the stakeholders on board to help with this project? Are you going to have to try to wing it solo, which becomes a little more difficult unless you do own the data sets and the data assets in question? But figuring out the timeline usually is a little more complex than just saying this is going to take a week. I'll just budget in an extra week to talk to people and get approvals for everything. So just understand this process sometimes takes time in order to get all the assets in that map that we just showed. And then the where. So we may find out that, hey, we found the 3 systems we needed. We have a CRM system. We have our sales system here. And then we also want to pull in this custom spreadsheet that research keeps, for example. Well, once you decide you pull those in, you probably know what those look like from above ground level here. But like the Titanic iceberg, there is a lot below the level that you probably know that is going to affect how you pull that data. So every system has its own complexities. A homegrown system in Access is generally going to have less complexities than, say, SAP when you're getting down to deep levels. But what we see on the surface, sometimes when we're dealing with data, we have to go much deeper and figure out problems that only exist in those deeper levels. So keep that in mind as well. Projects can quickly become more complex than we think. Also kind of hidden in the meeting here, since these are below ground, is the facet of dirty data. Once you get into modeling data, you will not find, I shouldn't say a single, but it'll be very rare for you to pull a data set and for it to be completely clean. So we're talking no misspellings, New York not spelled two different ways, New York, NY, NYC. Those kind of things pop up in almost every data set that we're involved in. And that's a whole cleaning mechanism that has to be added on in order to succeed. Data is very picky. So again, it comes back to this. Important things to remember here. You probably are at descriptive, maybe some diagnostics. So your organization probably has a good idea of what data they're getting. And ideally, you're looking for how to get to diagnostic and predictive. So what things do we need to know? Do we not know insights? Do we need to just go after general insights? That tool I showed you is a good idea of that. Let's analyze this data, show me what things I can be thinking about that I'm not thinking about. But again, just understanding this is a growth process. You can't go from any of these stages overnight. You certainly can't decide, well, we're just going to do prescriptive analytics. Doesn't work like that. Everything has to be built on top of everything else. And so don't get frustrated. Take your time through this process. That's the key takeaway. And that leaves us perfectly on time here with 10 minutes left for Q&A. Looking through the chat, I don't know if anybody else was able to put in a chat question. If not, you may be able to raise your hand or come off of mute. Looks like we may have one question coming in here. Thanks, Carrie, for the question. Do you know if Power BI can connect to Sage Intacct, or code would have to be connected to develop to the API? So Sage Intacct in particular, there's a couple ways that Power BI connects up. So let me show that again real quick while we're talking about it. So Power BI has what they call connectors, and they have about 200 of these built in. If I go to get data, you'll see all the different options that come up here. If I just look at all, they have a lot of the services. A lot of them are cloud-based services. LinkedIn, even, for example, which is kind of an odd one to pull in. For Sage Intacct, there's not one that comes out of the box. What we've found is there are a couple of custom connectors that basically snap into this Get Data tool that will do Sage Intacct. And then the other option for that would be to create exports that dump out to a shared drive. And kind of like you saw me pull in the Excel file here, that's the second option, the old export and import. But there are a couple of people that create, they're paid tools, but they create those connectors into Sage Intacct. So good question. Right. Didn't see anybody else typing, so don't think we have any more questions. I hope this was useful. I hope the demonstration kind of showed how simple it can be to start on this path. If you have any questions or want to touch base, maybe you're on a project hitting some blocking points, might need any help, here's my information. Feel free to email me or reach out, and I'll be happy to help. So with that, Brad, I think they have about 5 more minutes until the next session. Thanks, everyone.